All right, so we are on games and activities. So let me get this one screen back up. Share it. All right, so Jeff, especially for you, this is going to be a big thing. With you guys not, being basically in-house, you want to have as many activities as you can do for them. And so I've got a packet that I'll put up on the Facebook page for members, and that these are I've got about 300 group activities that you can do, and they don't have to be martial arts centric. They're just games and activities the kids can do, and they're group stuff. The one thing that I would recommend is that pick several group games you can do that the kids can start to master. Because if you introduce a new game every day, the kids that are really athletic, they'll get it. But the kids that are not so athletic, they'll feel frustrated. So some of these are very familiar. For anybody who's running a camp, you got basketball and football and soccer and foursquare and dodgeball and tennis. Capture the flag. Captain My Captain is a game we play a lot of. The kids love the world out of it. We'll have 100 kids playing this game. And with our mat being 4,200 square feet, they run from one end of the mat to the other as they're doing the different requirements. Toilet tag is something years ago. We had one summer. There was so much rain in Austin. We had floods. It was just not a good weather summer. But we had, I don't know what it was. It was like 30 or 35 straight days of rain. It was crazy. Some days were light rain, some days were heavy. But I mean, it was just crazy on how much rain we had. And so needless to say, all of our outdoor activities were non-existent. And this is like 2005, I think it was. And so we had to make up games. We had to make stuff up. So I invented toilet tag. And so what toilet tag is, it's regular tag. It's like freeze tag. But when they get tagged, they have to drop to one knee with their body in an upright position and their hands up in the air. And the hands out to the side is what it is. So the kids will come by and they'll sit on the edge of their knee and they'll push their hand down like they're flushing a toilet. And I know it sounds crazy, but the kids love the world out of it. Nerf wars, you can hold Nerf wars. There's a game we have called Jump the River. So we take two puzzle mat pieces, and then we take a puzzle mat trim piece, and then they have to jump. Hello. Yes. Hey, buddy, I got to call you back after 3 o'clock. I'm in the middle of doing a conference call with a bunch of people. I'm sorry. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. I want to make sure it wasn't an emergency. Okay, so jump the river. You have basically a start. They have to jump over a space, and then the puzzle mats are the landing pad. And so you can move them back at about an inch a shot as the team goes through. And so then you just get long jump competitions is what it is. Giant foursquare. So when we built and we didn't do it intentionally, but when we built this academy we have now that we built back in 2009, we put in 16 square foot rings for sparring. And so we have 4 of them on one side. And so 2 things came out of that are really good. One, we have giant foursquare. So that instead of having the small squares like they have at school, they have these huge squares. And so they'll do everything from giant foursquare to team foursquare, where they're doing foursquare things together. And then from there we have USTA has what's called junior tennis, and it's a 36-foot, basically a court. It's a smaller court. It's almost the size of a pickleball court is what it is. And so what we did is we just bought a company called Bowflex. They make portable nets, and we take them everywhere we go, from soccer nets to tennis nets to volleyball nets. And they will break all the way down. They go in these rolling carts, and we just take them with us wherever we go. But inside the academy, we can set those up, and we can play pickleball, we can play tennis, and they have a tennis ball that's not a tennis ball, it's a Nerf ball is what it is. It looks like a tennis ball, but it's really a Nerf ball. But it's great on building eye-to-hand coordination and things of that nature. We don't let them play full matches. What they do is they play 1 point. And so you have a line of kids. Whoever loses the point, the next person comes in. We have a service side, and then we have a receive side. So if the person on the receive side wins the point, they go over and they start serving. If the person on the receive side loses, then the next person just comes in. But the kids love that game, and it's a great way for them to keep doing things. We also do team balloon volleyball indoors. And so what I do is, if you've seen those new, they look like four-way nets. They look like a cross or an X, and they're nets. And then we pull out we take a balloon and we fill it up with air, and then the kids they play, basically four square volleyball with it. They're allowed so many hits per section, which is 2. And then we have another one where we play, it's almost like hacky sack with a small futsal ball. And so they have to use their feet to kick the ball over the net, and the net's only about this far off the ground. But it's a way for them to use their eyes and their hands and their feet. And then we play team foursquare, where we have like 10 kids in a ring. And then if the ball gets in somebody's ring and nobody hits it, then the last person in that ring leaves, or they have to play rock, paper, scissors to see who's leaving. And you get down to where you've got one square and one person in that ring on who wins the whole thing. There's rock, paper, scissors battles. You can look this up on YouTube. You can basically take the rings, put them on the ground, and you make like a course. And then you just have multiple teams, and they're battling it out on who's winning rock, paper, scissors. And if they win, they advance a space. And then that person goes to the back of the line. The next person comes up and meets, and they just go back and forth until they eventually eliminate a team off of the set. We have tic-tac-toe throws. We have tic-tac-toe races. And so you have a team of so many kids, and they have to take a beanbag and run it across the mat, put it in a tic-tac-toe area. They run back, and then they just keep that up. And then we have our roof in our building is 23 feet in the center. And so we have 2 ropes that we have there, and 2 big crash pads that we fold over, so it doubles as a crash pad. It's about this thick. So if the kids climbing the rope, they fall off, they fall on the crash pad, likelihood of them getting hurt is minimal. But it's great for building core strength and building grip strength. And we even do a little competition. We do relay races, and then we also have musical rings. And so what we do with the musical rings is that we have rings on the ground. We play music, just like musical chairs, but the kids have to run around the entire mat. And if you have an outdoor area, you can do the same thing. And so you could have them out, the music's playing, they're running around, and the rings are spaced out. They're not like like musical chairs where they're all together. And so they're running around, they got cones they have to run around, the music shuts off, they have to run inside and get in a ring. And we just do elimination like they would with musical chairs. Sharks and minnows, especially if you got a big spot or a big space you can move within. Sharks and minnows is a good thing. On the martial arts side, we have what's called shuriken tag. So we take like Nerf balls or the soft, not the hard ones, but the soft pads that you kick into, and you can toss those. And if somebody gets touched, then they have to go out. I think one of my favorite games that I play with the kids is a game called Incoming. And so we set the kids up on the other side of the mat. And so our mat is 100 feet long. And so they have obstacles they can climb into and do stuff, but they army crawl and bear crawl. And they get to a certain point, and then we call incoming. They have to freeze, and then we'll throw the Nerf balls. And if they get hit, they have to go back. And so the kids love that because they get to do a lot of stuff. Of course, Nerf Wars is a good one. You have Get Off My Lawn, which is basically like a spaceship. They have to run to certain spaces, they have to get on there and go from there. And then any kind of basketball stuff. Now we have small basketball goals. They're only 7 foot. Inside the academy, we can play knockout. We can play, horse. We can play any of those games that we can play in there. The kids love knockout. They'll play that over and over and over again. And we have 4 basketball goals. We'll have them set up and they just play. And then the winning teams will actually come on. We do soccer as well. And one of the things I do when I'm doing group games is I do them where kids are not on there for long periods of time. So like if we're doing soccer, we'll have teams set up. And then as soon as a team scores, the losing team moves off and the other team moves on. No different than if you watch soccer drills going on in a team, they'll split up. And as soon as one of the teams scores, they have different colored pennies on. And as soon as they score, then the losing team pulls off and the other team pulls on. And they'll just rotate that around. But they only spend probably, because we're on inside the academy, it's only in about a 40-foot space. It'd be like futsal light halfway. But that way they get to do that, but it's not getting into a long, drawn-out match and have the kids sit in the side go, come on, and you score. So we keep it real fast, and we give them about a 4-minute time limit. If neither team scores, then they do rock, paper, scissors. The team that won is in, the other team is out, the other team rotates in. So that way we're rotating them every few minutes, and they're constantly playing and doing or getting those things done. So the biggest thing with doing games and group activities is make sure that your staff is setting it up properly so that you are not sitting for prolonged periods of time, because nothing will upset the flow of the day than having a situation where the kids are not engaged. They're just sitting idle for long periods of time. It does not bode well. With my older group, in the activity when we're it's not like the younger ones, like the kindergartners and first graders. We do them a little differently just because of where they're at. But the older kids, we have 2 separate areas. And if they're doing a movie in the back, I let them do other things. They can do origami. They can do arts and crafts. We call it creativity time. They can build. They can be creative. They can do stuff. And so they get to do multiple things at one time. And, that's a lot for them. That's a better speed than just sitting idle for a little bit. Okay, let me check something real fast. All right, so do me a favor. I'm gonna put up all the games inside of the Facebook page area, and they'll have descriptions on how the games are to be played, and even some basically some, lack of a better description, some artwork that goes along with it to give you the flow of the game, the artwork, the flow of the game, the rules, things of that nature. All right, so let's get into a really important conversation. We're about 10 minutes ahead. We're about 15 minutes ahead of where we need to be at. Let's get into safety protocols and why this is so important. You want to make sure that your staff, number one, is certified CPR and AED trained. Now, we have AEDs in the building. I'm actually in the process of right now procuring AEDs for each of our vehicles. We've never needed it, but I would much rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So make sure that you go through safety training. Now, for us, we teach an active shooter course inside of our academy. And so in the Army, they have what's called 18 Deltas. The 18 series is basically combat medics, everything from a corpsman all the way up to spec ops medics. And so the 18 Deltas, they're the spec ops medics. So like if you've heard of Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, Marcus went through the 18 Delta training that the Army has, even though he's a Navy SEAL. And so they go through a very specific training. Well, one of my, inside of our active shooter training, I've got a friend of mine named John Wayne Taylor, and JWT is an 18 Delta. And so the course is very, very tough. You can only take the course one time and you pass it. If you fail the course, then you're out. You can never retake it again. You only get that one shot. So I would highly recommend, you know, if you're going to do first aid training, find people that have that level of training. So the things that we work on are way overboard for what we need, but it's one of those things that should we ever run into a situation that's severe, we can handle it. So we know how to triage a mass casualty situation. We know how to, you know, apply tourniquets, stuff wounds. We carry clotting agents and all kinds of stuff with us. And so we're way more certified than what we need to be in that regard. But it's also great knowledge to have just for just everyday life. So make sure that you're first aid certified. Make sure you're CPR and AED certified. Make sure you have accident and injury logbooks. And the reason being is that, and even if you're running sports camps, you need to have safety protocols, how we're handling situations. Make sure we have ice on hand, or at least the ice packs, the disposable ice packs, so that if anything happens, child twists their ankle, they roll it, they hurt a knee, we can get ice on it immediately to mitigate further situations with it. And so that's where you want to do that. Also, have an activity, accident and injury logbook. Because I can tell you, personal experience, you know, little Johnny was opening up the bathroom door, another kid pushing the door open, hits his toe, and, you know, skins it up a little bit. So we take care of it. We, you know, clean it up, put ointment on it, wrap it up with a Band-Aid. But and this was years ago, but we did not write a logbook, just a little toe, right? Well, when mom and dad get there, he tells this elaborate story how one of the campers took and slammed the door into his foot on purpose, and that, you know, he wasn't doing anything to him, and, you know, all this stuff. And so, and that conversation happened on the way home. That conversation didn't happen at the academy. We're going to be like, whoa, 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 wait, that's not what happened. But unfortunately, now you got a parent who is irate, calling up, how could you let that happen to my child? You know, and that wasn't the case, but we now had to deal with this situation. And so managing those situations, putting it in a logbook, having a conversation with the parent is going to greatly reduce fabricated stories getting out on the way home. You know, a bump on the head turns into, they let a Tyrannosaurus Rex loose in the building, and I just barely escaped getting hit by the tail, but it hit me in the head. And so, and I'm exaggerating, but we've had some pretty big whoppers being told. I mean, I had a mother one time was so mad, and it finally took me about an hour to finally make her understand that none of what her child told her was true. Outside, he just had a bruised elbow, right? But he was running, he tripped over his own feet, fell on his elbow. So you want to make sure and mitigate and control that conversation. I'm not saying lie, I'm saying control the conversation so that the truth is told to the parent right off the bat. They're not getting an exaggerated event in this child's head that was doom and gloom. So make sure you keep the logbooks. Make sure that the accident is written down as soon as you're able to. The people that were involved in it are the ones filling out the logbook. It's not a situation of someone filling out the logbook who wasn't there, getting secondhand information. We want to make sure when the parent comes in that we have a conversation with them again, they sign the logbook. That way everybody's on the same page. Whatever action was taken is listed in the logbook. what ice was applied, if Tylenol or Motrin were given, if a sling was put on, whatever it is, make sure that that is in there. And who did the work? Because I'm telling you, it will greatly reduce your frustration and a parent spreading wrong stories about your academy. So make sure and do that. Make sure if there's two kids, hypothetically say that Johnny and Jimmy were playing a game, they're running around, they're not paying attention, they butt heads with each other. Or Johnny ran over Jimmy. Not on purpose, it just happened. Johnny gets a bump on his head, and Jimmy gets, a bruise on his thigh or skinned up his knee, whatever. Make sure it's filled out. Make sure that both parents fill it out so that everyone is on the same page. Again, you don't want things going home, and on the way home, stories are being told. Make sure that you, right now, look at everything you need first aid kit-wise and stock it. Now, if you have a vehicle, some state laws require that you have some state laws require that you have first aid kits on the vehicle. I would highly recommend that you carry them with you. We have major first aid kits. They're actually rolling backpacks that we carry with us everywhere that we go. And it's way more than what we need. We've got tourniquets and is what they call Israeli bandages in there. There is clotting agents. There is Band-Aids. There's Neosporin. There's Tylenol. There's eye cleanse. You name it, we've got it. I've got surgical tweezers in there in case, and these come in handy. The surgical tweezers are metal. They're not those plastic piece of crap ones you find in first aid kits. They're the actual metal ones that have different tips on the end of them. Because if you're out in the wilderness at all, meaning you're out in nature at all, around a tree, around anything that's got a wood post, a kid's going to get a splinter. And if we can get that splinter out fast, then it doesn't, become a situation later on in the day. And so that part, I will tell you, is a definite must. I will also tell you, because the way the schools are designed, they want to put a Band-Aid on everything. So unless it's got blood coming out of it, it's got a scrape, we don't put Band-Aids on it. We just tell them, and that's good. It needs to be up in the air. This way it's going to get stronger. Make sure that everything is fully stocked, and make sure you have it on your employee checklist who isn't responsible for the first aid bag that week. The first aid bag, that is where the medicine is stored for the kids' stuff. Now, one thing I will tell you about medicine, I should have mentioned it earlier. When you do medicine for kids, Tylenol and Motrin are a little different, but if you are administering prescribed medication, you need to make sure that, one, that they have it on the medical release inside the paperwork. Two, it needs to come in a prescription bottle and stay in that prescription bottle. So when the nurse, for us, our nurse is the one that puts it where it needs to be at. If it's going with that group, it goes in that bag. Whoever's administering the medicine has that bottle. And it's inside a pouch that we carry with us. So that everybody's got that. We do have one, I don't think we have them this summer that I'm aware of, but we had one last summer that we had a liquid medicine that had to stay on ice. So we would put the backpack in the freezer. The next morning, as we were loading it up, that ice pack would come out. It would go inside the pouch. That way, it kept the medicine cool and cold. And that way, it wasn't souring on their stomach, because that was one of the requirements. So just learn to adapt to that. The pouch we have is like a small. It's only about this big, but it's like a small little lunchbox, like an insulated lunchbox. That way, if we have anything cold has to go in there, we have it. Make sure your AED has been certified and everyone knows where it is. So certifications on AEDs will go out over certain times. You want to do a battery check, because the last thing you need is you go to use that AED and you realize, oh crap, the battery's dead. Then it does you no good whatsoever. So you just want to make sure you have that. If you have the ability, as you're going out on field trips, if you have the ability to actually carry an AED with you, it's not a bad thing. It's just another level of safety that you have on the setup. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about vehicle safety. Because when you get into where you're doing field trips, this is something you definitely want to make sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Now, I'll tell you that we have 12 vehicles. We actually have 13, but I'm selling one of them. But we have 12 vehicles, 12 buses and vans. And maintenance is one of those things that you definitely want to make sure that you're being proactive about. I have a mechanic. He comes and does regular maintenance on it. In fact, yesterday and today, we were actually doing brakes. So most people don't realize that when you do brakes on any vehicle, you don't necessarily have to turn the rotors or replace them every time. They've got a mill width that they have to stay within. And if you don't run the pads down to where they're cutting into the rotor, you don't have to get the rotor turned or get it replaced in most cases. A lot of times you can replace the pads up to 2 to 3 times without having to turn the rotors or get new rotors. And that's your biggest expense. Cost of pads is not that bad. If you get the standard pads, about $35, $40. If you get the heavy duty pads, you're talking $50, $60 wholesale, about $70 to $100 retail. So we had 6 vehicles that needed pads. We had all the pads taken care of. It was $700 or $800 by the time we did the pads and the labor and everything else. But you know what? None of the rotors had to be turned. So look at that stuff ahead of time. Do your weekly checks. One of the most expensive lessons that we learn, and even though we had vehicle checks in and we had vehicle logs in, I had one employee that was just didn't want to do the work. And so they were lying about checking the oil every week. Well, they blew up a diesel engine. And the bus I bought on auction for about, I don't know what it was, $600 or $700. And a new 7.3 liter diesel engine would have been $4,000 or $5,000. Unfortunately, it was cheaper for me to go and buy another vehicle at auction than it was just to repair that one. But it's one of those lessons that had the vehicle been checked, really, it had been checked, not just checked. I said I checked it and just fill out a log and turn it in. So I have one person checking, I have another person going behind. That way they're accountable to each other and they're accountable to us. All the fluids need to be checked every week. Especially when you get into summer, it gets hot. You're going to have situations probably with coolant. You don't want oil going bad, right? Because these are the things you need. You also want to make sure that your windshield wiper fluid is filled up. Because if you get one of those little pesky rains that's not very hard, but it's just enough to get the windshield a little wet and you got no windshield wiper fluid, then you don't have a clear windscreen to look through. You want to make sure that your brake fluid and all those things are where they need to be at. It also allows you to pre-identify any problems that are starting to come up. If I'm having to add fluid to a vehicle every week, something's not right. Case in point, we had oil changes done 2.5 months ago. And so we do all the vehicles at one time. They stay on the same cycle. And when they were putting the oil filter on, the mechanic tightened it too much. And when he pulled down on it, he put a slight puncture in the oil filter. Now, when it was sitting still, it was never leaking oil. We could never find it. When it was running, it was trickling out. So when we were checking every week, it'd be down, like 1/8 of a quart. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. And luckily enough, my mechanic found it because the hole was actually at the top of the filter up near the body frame. So you couldn't see it. And when it was leaking, it was actually because the vehicle was moving, it was blowing it out the back. So it wasn't actually leaking on the ground. And so it's just one of those weird things. We were able to find it and repair it. But what came about with that was when the staff came to me and said, hey, this vehicle, and it's a 2019 Ford Transit, this vehicle's losing oil. And so, we're trying to search it, and we finally found out what it was. But if you're not checking those things, you're not being proactive in the upkeep and the maintenance of them. And these things are not something you want to have break down on a field trip, because that's all the kids are going to talk about. Parents pick up, how was your day today? Oh, the bus broke down. It'll be the first thing out of their mouth. We've been there. We've done that. So just understand what that is. Also have a backup protocol If a bus goes down, a vehicle goes down, they're mechanical. It may happen. What is your backup SOP, standing operating procedures? What are we doing? How are we communicating with the mechanic on getting things fixed as fast as possible, especially during summer camp? All right. Make sure all safety equipment is loaded on your vehicles. So we have seat belts in every single one of our seats. One of the things that we do 2 to 3 times a year is we go in and check every seat belt to make sure it's working. Click it, unclick it, sit down with it, make sure the tension stuff is working properly. All of our vehicles, except for 2, have the retractable type seat belts. 2 of them have the, hit it and pull on the tension. But we have to make sure that when the kids are getting in it, that the staff goes by, pulls the strap, makes sure that the seat belt is tight. That's one reason why whenever we're doing field trips, when we're on the way back, we tell them to sit in the same seats. That way they have the same seatbelt tension they had before. You want to make sure that if there's anything that's not working properly, especially air conditioning systems, make sure and test those long before summer starts so that you know what to do. If the door's not opening or closing properly, if a door handle's broke, anything of that nature, you want to make sure and get it fixed now so it doesn't become an issue later on. Keep first aid kits on the vehicles. That way you have them all the time. I personally never allow our fuel levels to get below a half a tank. Half a tank is our fill-up spot. And the biggest reason why is I know that even if somebody screws up, they don't tell me about a tank not being at half full, we take off on a field trip, everywhere we go in the vehicles we have, we can make it out and back on a half a tank. Now, I don't ever want to run it low, but we have that ability to get where we need to go at and get back, and we've had situations in the past where I had to stop and get fuel. I don't like doing that. I don't like filling the vehicles up with kids. So you have to get all the kids off, fill the vehicle up. Likelihood of something happening is very, very slim. But again, I don't want those things to occur. All right, let's talk about loading and unloading safety procedures. So one thing that we want to talk about is when we're loading any of the kids on the vehicles. If you're loading at the academy, if you can get the vehicles up to where the doors are at, if you only have a couple of vehicles, that would be ideal. For us, we have so many vehicles, we do a different system, and it's the only time you'll see us moving kids in a parking lot, but we have the ends of the parking lot where the drive-through comes through, they're blocked off. So, it won't stop a really big vehicle from getting through, but it'll deter them from moving through there. And so we load them up. We know how many kids are going on a vehicle based upon their seating capacity and staff members on that vehicle. I try never to send a driver with, say, 13, 14 kids. I want a driver, an assistant there with them, and then the kids inside of the camp. Excuse me. The next thing we do is when we are moving them, we block off the parking lot. We have the driver with their vehicle. We have the other counselors on the passenger side of the vehicle loading them up. With our transit vans, we teach the kids how to load the back to the front. Because if they try to load the front, then a log jam is going to happen. The kids are going to get mad because someone's stepping on them or bumping with a backpack. So we just load the back up to the front. Unless we've got a child that needs special attention, maybe they're not acting right that day, and then we'll make sure that they're at the front by where the counselors and the drivers are at. So just make sure you've got a very clear ingress and egress on the setup. Now, we do roll calls before we leave the building while we're inside the building. When we get to the location, we do another roll call to make sure we have everybody accounted for. While that roll call is going on, the drivers park their vehicles, stand up, they walk the entire bus. Now, if we're on a field trip where we're not carrying our lunch inside, The lunchbox will stay on. Water bottles go with us so that they have the ability to drink and hydrate. And we do mandatory hydrations. If we're out moving and grooving, every 15 minutes, hydrate. Let's get some water going. In addition to that, when we are loading back up, we're done with the field trip, we're loading up. The counselors that are managing the kids, we'll get them together. We start doing roll call, separate persons doing head counts. We match those numbers up. Bus drivers are getting their vehicles and they're pulling them up to the curb. When we're out at other places, I do not want the kids walking in the street. So we have them come up to the curb and they load on their bus. But before that's even done, all roll calls are done. Every kid is accounted for. And we're doing head counts. And then those are matched up. And then we take them to their respective vehicles, get them on there. And then a staff member does a front to back check on seat belts. Everybody's belted up and we are on the road. Now, when we get back to the academy, when we return from our field trip, we pull the vehicles all the way up to where the building is at. The kids will exit the buses right by where the sidewalk's at, and then they'll line up outside. And we do a roll call before they ever go inside. And we do roll calls and head counts. And then again, I'll tell you, with roll calls and head counts, if you have staffing, have it done by two separate people. One person doing roll call, one doing head count. The roll call person counts the check marks on the sign in, sign out sheets. And then you have a copy of that inside of your blueprint. And so each one of those boxes are for when you're doing roll call checks. When we get back, they're doing a roll call check. The person counts the number of check marks. The person doing the head count comes back. They match numbers. They do a 1, 2, 3 call. 1, 2, 3, 67. And if they say match numbers. If they don't match numbers, then we do it again. When we do the second time, we have all the kids stand up and we call their names and they have to sit down. And that'll typically will solve it pretty quick on child didn't hear their name called. They were playing around. They were on the bus and they got off late and then started the head count. Council didn't realize it, but those numbers have to match. And then we move them into the building. And when we're moving into the building, we want to make sure that they're doing the right things inside of the building as well. Make sure that this is what I tell the kids all the time. When we're pulling up to the building or we're pulling up to our field trip site, no belts are unbuckled until the driver says it's okay to get up. Because inevitably, if the kid thinks, well, we're parked and not realizing we're not, they undo their belt, they go to stand up, and then the bus driver takes off again to move up a little farther, and the kid's not paying attention, then they're going to get dislodged somewhere on that bus, especially if they're standing up, or if we're rolling and they try to do it, and then they break heavy, and then they're knocked on the floor. There was a video that just showed, and this is one reason why we wear seatbelts in all of our buses. There was a video that was shot in Vegas the other day where two cars were racing, and a guy in a Mustang broadsided a school bus and flipped it on its side. But I mean, it tossed the kids around like rag dolls. And so that's one reason why we have these safety protocols in place. We also talk to the kids about where the safety exits are at. Should anything happen, how do you get out of these buses? Whether it's a rooftop escape, side window escape, or rear door escape. We want to make sure that if the front door is blocked or the side sliding doors are blocked, how are we getting out of these vehicles? And that you want them to understand that. Because if both counselors get knocked out, I'm not saying anything's going to happen, but we just want to prepare for everything that could be possibly coming up. All right, let's go to the next part. Medication distribution. Now, we talked about this a little bit before, but I'm going to go over it one more time. All prescription medication must be in a bottle. So tell the parents to go to the pharmacy when they have the prescription filled, tell them they need a daycare bottle. Now, we're not a daycare, but they'll understand what that means. They'll split the the script up, and it'll have the child's name and what the dosage is. We've never had the health department come in, but I want to make sure that if they ever walk in the door, Child and Family Protection Services walk in and they know we're distributing medicine and we don't have it in a script bottle for a child, that they don't think we're just giving medicine out of a plastic bag to somebody and then they decide to go ahead and file charges for distributing any kind of narcotics or anything else for that matter. We just want to make sure that it's protected. Have one staff member designated to deal with medications. For me, it's my nurse. She takes care of all the medications. Everything is checked into her. If a parent ever brings a medicine up, our SOP is that you don't take that medicine from the parent. You take the parent to our nurse. Her name is Mrs. Jones, and they communicate what has to happen, what the dosages are, because she's going to match what it says on the script bottle to what the parents are saying to make sure they're lining up. She goes and looks at their paperwork to make sure that the medical release form is on there and has the dosage of the medicine, has the medicine listed, who it's for, and it's signed off. So if anybody comes and says, why are you giving this kid medicine? We have a sheet. Plus, if anything ever happens to a child, if we have to take them to the hospital, now luckily in 31 years, I've only had to get one kid to a hospital, and that was on the parent. I'll tell that story in a second. But in that situation, we have a signed document by the parents that this is what the medicine is the child's taking, and we're able to give them medical treatment. That goes for EpiPens, any kind of medications, anything of that nature. I want it logged. And even if you're running a sports camp, if you have an EpiPen, don't just take the EpiPen from the parent and if something happens, if they get stung by something, just use this. Make sure you have it logged. That way it's a CYA. And if you ever have to use it, because an EpiPen is not like a daily medication thing. An EpiPen's, we're in a catastrophic moment. There's been anaphylactic shock starting to kick in. That EpiPen's designed to cancel that and get us back to at least close to an even keel. But you want to make sure and document that in the injury logbook and have the parents sign it. And have them bring you another one as fast as possible. So that way you've got another one just in case it happened. Years ago, and we had medical and transportation releases in our handbooks, in our paperwork for the last 20 plus years. In 2004, we had a girl in camp. It was 2005. We had a girl, one of those 2 years, we had a girl in camp. We're out at the park playing. And I was going between two different camps. And one of my staff members calls me and says, hey, something's up with this girl. She's like really started to swell up. Her face is swollen up. Her neck is swollen up. And she's having a hard time breathing. And I said, well, look, I pulled her paperwork fast because I didn't have it in the truck with me. And he said, there's nothing on the paperwork. I said, there's nothing about any allergies or anything else. He said, no. And I said, okay, call an ambulance. And we happened to be a place where one of the children's hospitals was near us. And I said, tell them to take them there. So I'm calling the parent as I'm traversing across town from one camp to where they were at. And I just detoured and went to the hospital. The entire 30 minutes, I'm calling the mother on the drive that I have, trying to get a hold. She won't pick up the phone. She finally picks up the phone. She goes, yeah, what can I do for you? I'm like, is your daughter allergic to anything? Well, yeah, she's allergic to fire ants. And I said, okay, we're looking at the paperwork. It's nowhere on there. Yeah, I don't typically put that down. I said, does she have an EpiPen? Yeah. Where's it at? Well, I've got it with me. And I'm like, well, that does us no good whatsoever. I said, so meet us at Dell Children's Hospital. And that's the only time I've ever had to have anybody there. But during our orientation meetings, this is something we cover at great length about the importance of helping us help the child. Because I don't want any child having, a traumatic experience, not just because of camp, just in general like that. Because it's one of those situations, that's a life and death situation. That's not a stub toe situation. So we want to make sure that we're dealing with that. Keep a list of all students requiring any medication. If anything ever happens, we want to make sure that if my nurse is not available, I know who has what medication, just in case. I want to know where it's held at. We have one place that it's stored at, and the medicine never leaves that spot. We have a bin that's there, and it's up out of the reach of the kids. So when we're in the building, that's where everything's stored back to. So when we come back from the field trip, the EpiPens go inside of there, and then that way they're stored there for the afternoon. So if anything happens while the child's in the building, we're not having to go find the first aid bags. We know exactly where it's at. Inhalers, same thing. We want to make sure that we've got that. Any unexpected medication distribution, make sure you have a medical release before distributing, contact parents, and create an activity log. If you ever have to give Tylenol, ibuprofen, Benadryl, anything of that nature, even if you have permission from the parents, I still put a phone call in to them. Even if I don't reach them, I've done the phone call, we send a text message, and then we administer the medication. If I don't have a release done, and there's only like one or two parents that never want us to administer medication. I think primarily because we have a nurse on staff and they understand we have a medical professional in the building. And so I think that's one reason why we don't ever hardly get pushback on that one. But we also talk to the parents about, and this is why the orientation meetings are so important, is to get everybody on the same page. Even if you're running a sports camp, you need to get your sports parents on the same page you're on. You need to make them understand that if they're coming to the sports camp to watch, they're to sit on the sidelines, keep their mouth closed, and let the coaches do their jobs. They're not bleacher black belts, as we call them in the martial arts industry. They're not little league coaches sitting in the bleachers. Those little, you understand what I'm talking about. But we want to make sure that we are setting the tone and we are setting the expectations for the parents. And that's one reason why the orientation meetings are so important, because we communicate these things. That's why we're talking about that. So camper safety. Every Monday, so on Fridays, and we'll talk about communication. I think we're doing communication tomorrow. On Fridays, I send out an email to the parents. And inside of that email, it outlines what we're doing each day. And then I have a spreadsheet that has, it has what we're doing each day, what time I need the kids there by. If you know you're leaving at a certain time or you want an activity to start at a certain time, even if you're not doing field trips and you're just doing stuff in-house, you want to start at 9 o'clock, do not tell the parents to be there at 9 o'clock. Because I'm telling you, 20% of them will show up late. They'd be late to, if somebody said to them, I have $1 billion in my hand, if you can be here on time, they'd miss it. So we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves a cushion. I have one of my friends, I love him to death. Him and I have been close for years and years. And he is always late to everything. So I know that if I need him here at 10:30, I'll tell him, hey, Hirsch, I need you here at 9:45, man. I know what time you're showing up, but that gives me the ability to make sure that I'm on time. Make sure the parents understand when we say we need them by 8 o'clock, we need them by 8 o'clock. We had during spring break camp, sent out the arrival and departure schedule. We were going on a field trip that was like 45, 50 minutes away. Told the parents we needed them there by 8 o'clock. I knew we were leaving at 8:30, but we have to do pre-field trip checklists because with the little bitty ones, I want to make sure we're going to the bathroom. I want to make sure, because we're 45 minutes, 50 minutes away from the academy, it's not like we can just run around the corner and grab their lunch or a water bottle. So we want to make sure that we have everything with us. Everybody's accounted for. Everybody understands where we're going, what we're doing. So we want to make sure that the kids are there on time, and I don't want to be rushed. And I had, a lady at spring break camp got super mad because I told her that we left 8:30 on time. They showed up at like 8:35 and they were like, well, where are they at? And I'm like, well, you're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. They've already left. Well, you're going to take them out there, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And it's even outlined in our parent handbook. If they're late showing up for a field trip, they have to take the child to there, and they cannot be left behind if you're doing field trips. If they want them to go to the field trip, they have to take them. Them being late on their part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Now, I will tell you that we communicate heavily with the parents and ask them to please, when we send out the arrival and departure schedule on Friday, please go over it with your child so that they understand in their head, we have to be at the academy at 7:30, 8:30, so that they know there's no lollygagging in the morning or pushing back on mom and dad about getting up and getting ready. They have to be on time. The second thing is on Mondays when we sit down and go over the week's schedule with the children, we do the same thing again. We go over the schedule with them, where we're going each day, what time I need them to be there. Because I even tell the kids, hey, I need you here on time so we can do bathroom checks. We can do all of the pre-trip protocols that we do to make sure that, one, we're not late to our field trip. We're not forgetting anything behind, like your lunch or your water bottle or whatever it is you're needing. And so that's one reason why we go over that with them. And I tell them, you have my permission to nag your parents about leaving the house on time. If they've got a problem, just tell them to talk to me. Most of them don't. But we do have those families that are consistently late all the time. But I tell them, you have to be on time. And it's not teaching, you're not helping me teach your child about the importance of punctuality if you're constantly late. Cover bus and field trip expectations. Mm-hmm. So talk to the children about what's expected while they're on the bus in transit. Seatbelts have to be worn. They have to be pulled, not where it's cutting them off, but they have to be pulled taut. They're allowed to talk to their friends. They're not allowed to spin around, loosen the seatbelt up, and spin around to talk to their friends. They're not allowed to put their hands to the seat and try and grab somebody else. They're not allowed to throw things on the bus. Absolutely not allowed to, when we stop at a stop sign or a stoplight, to undo their belt and switch seats. Whatever seat we have them in is the seat we have them in. Leave it up to the staff that if there's any kind of conflict with two kids, then they'll relay it to the bus driver. Hey, we need to, next time we get to a stoplight, let me know. I need to change a couple of kids. But if you do some of that preemptively ahead of time, if you know you've got a couple of kids that are just, they love each other one minute and hate each other the next minute, and they're constantly just poking at each other, don't let them sit next to each other. Make sure that they understand about loading and unloading, what's expected. Make sure they understand when we get to our destination, nobody undoes their seatbelt until the driver instructs them to. Make sure that they understand all these, and when we get into the actual field trip itself, make sure they understand that as well. And I know it's going to sound crazy, but we even talk to them about, hey, when you're bowling, I don't want two of you up at the bowling line at the same time. Because if something happens with a bowling ball, kid misthrows it, drops it, lands on another kid's foot, or hits them with it, it's not going to be a comfortable situation. When we do zip lines, they have to understand that they're not allowed to leave the zip line area from where it's at. If we're doing paddle boats, if we're in a deeper area, especially with my teen kids, when we're doing the stand-up paddle boats or the foot paddle boats, and we're doing canoes, going in without a life vest on is not an option. And if they don't want to wear the life vest, then their butt will sit on shore, because we do not want to have anything happen to them, especially when you got multiple kids in the water. You want to make sure that you've got all that taken care of. Now, one thing I will tell you, especially around pool, is that when you're in the water, if you have kids that are wearing a vest, it has to be a Coast Guard approved life vest, not the arm floaties. They have a new Coast Guard one that goes on like a jacket. The arms go through it. They look like arm floaties, but it goes through and it zips up in the back. And so that is one that's acceptable, but it has to be a U.S. Coast Guard approved life vest. And so even on those kids, we don't let them just roam anywhere in the pool. They have to stay segregated off. Now, one thing that we do is that we have a swim band system. We have 3 colored bands. One is red, one is yellow, one is green. The pool that we swim in is an older pool. I really love it because it's a straight shot. It's only 25 meters long. It does have a small 1 meter diving board on the one end. It's not even a meter. I think it's probably like a half a meter maybe. But it's a low dive is what it is, low diving board. But it's 11 foot in deep and 11 foot in depth, excuse me. And so we have protocols even for the swimming. So if they're swimming, everybody starts out with a red band. The red band basically states you have to stay in the shallow end. The water has to be below your shoulder line. And then the kids who have life vest on, there's a set of steps that we have off to the left. They have to stay in that area. And then I have 3 staff members that are just in that area. I have 2 up on the wall or up on the deck of the pool. And then I have 1 in the water corralling them, make sure they don't try to move away. Then I have 2 more staff members that are put out that act like a perimeter to make sure the kids are set up. And if you look at a rectangle pool, we have staff members that are stationed all the way around the pool. Most times, if our kids are messing up, we call them out before the lifeguards ever do, because you want to control and manage that situation. We allow them to play, but we don't allow them to, horseplay, because with the number of kids that we're watching, I want to make sure it's safe. Now, if they have the ability to swim, our swim test is pretty tough. It's a 25-meter swim. It's across the pool and back, freestyle swim with a side breathe. I'm looking at 2 things, strength of stroke, and I'm looking at their endurance. And if either one of those 2 are off, then they cannot earn at least a yellow band. The yellow band says that they can go off the diving board. The diving board's that they can get off the diving board and they swim over to the ladder. They can't hang out in the deep end. They can't tread water in the deep end. But their swimming is strong enough they could do that, but I don't want to run into any situations. A green band means they have carte blanche. They can be in the deep end all the time. They have to be really good swimmers. I mean, like near swim team type level swim, because I do not want to have to worry about, and don't get me wrong, we have staff down there. There's lifeguards down there. The likelihood of anything happens is going to be slim to zero, but I never want to put us in a situation where we're reacting or having to feel that angst of, there's so many kids and we don't have enough coverage. So that's what you want to do around the water. Roll call at every move. And make sure the kids understand that. When we're doing roll call, nobody talks so that we can hear it, because we have some kids that have really light voices, and they've really, over the past 2 years, have really regressed in their confidence of talking. So, and a lot of kids, and some of my Indian kids especially, they're very, very quiet mannered. So by the time we start on Monday, we'll call their name out and be like, "Yes, sir." And you can't hear them. Staff's around, they can, they answer. I'm like, "Well, I need you to answer a little louder." By the time Friday comes along, they've really opened up and you can hear them. And every time they get a little louder, I'm so proud of you. That's such an awesome job. And so that's where they're at. But we want to make sure that we're getting to hear their voice. If you move, major move, I'm not talking about you're at a field trip and you're inside the zoo and you move from one exhibit to another, right? That's something different. But if you're moving from, you're at the academy, you do a roll call, you get them on the buses, you move to the next point, do a roll call. When you're coming back, do a roll call. Now, one thing we do is when we're going in big groups, we break those groups up into smaller groups. So we'll have one counselor with 5 or 6 kids, and they're responsible for being kind of their tour guide for the setup. For the skills camps, I would highly recommend that you set your numbers at a manageable level where the kids get a lot of touches on the ball. We don't want the numbers being so big compared to the camp ratios being so big that it takes too long for the kids to get another turn on whatever drill that you are working on. Excuse me, I apologize. Proper clothing requirements for the day's activities. On the sports camp side, they got to have their cleats, or if they've got a glove that's needed, or a bat, or the lacrosse stick, or whatever it is, they have to bring their stuff. And typically in soccer, we make them all bring their own soccer ball. Now we have a ton of futsal balls that we have in the building. I like those balls because they're just a little bit heavier, and they don't fly up in the air as much. And I don't have to have kids bringing soccer balls with them every day. I highly recommend that everybody wears shoes and socks, regardless of what kind of camp you're running. Skills camp, day camp, doesn't make any difference. Wear shoes and socks, especially if you have a building and you're having to bring the kids back in the building after you've been out. The one thing I tell them to do is when we get back in the building, shoes and socks come off, because I want to let their feet air out a little bit because they've been sweating. If they're not wearing socks, I'll make them go in and clean their feet, because I don't want all that sweat and nastiness back on my mats and my floors, and they stink. That's just what it is. So we want to do that. When you are doing water days, I highly recommend that they wear flip-flops or sliders so that you have all of the stuff that they need and a towel. So when you're doing your pre-trip protocols, just make sure they've got all those things. My front door person, when they're coming in the morning, they'll do a scan. So this child's coming in, I see your water bottle, where's your lunchbox? Oh, it's out in the car. Okay, we want to see those things. On water days, they come in with shoes and socks. Do you have flip-flops in your backpack? Well, no, as parents, can you get those to me? Or because the thing with kids, they're going to find water. They're going to find water. They're going to find mud. And so we want to make sure that when we're going on swim days, I really don't want them wearing shoes and socks, because they'll find a puddle to stomp in, get their shoes all wet. By the time they come back to the academy, they're still soaked. They're in their lockers, their cubbies, and they're smelling up with that mildewy smell that's coming out. So sliders, flip-flops, Crocs are great with no socks. On major field trip days, our major field trip days for us are Tuesdays and Fridays. And so I ask them to wear their camp shirts on those days, so that when we're going out in big groups, I can identify my kids quickly. I can get them where they need to be at. If one of them strays off, we know we can get them. Wait a minute. And like I said, we wear bright colors. Like you could be out on an airline tarmac with our colors and bring a plane into the jet bridge, into the gate. Make sure that on swim days, when they get back, please ask the parents to get a decent size Ziploc bag. When they get back on swim days, I want all the wet clothes off. They go in the plastic bag. It is zipped up. They put dry clothes on, and then their towel and stuff go in their locker, so that we get all that stuff. And then we tell the parents, please make sure when your child's coming out to you that they're grabbing everything wet out of their locker, so it's not staying here overnight and possibly mildewing, and then we have that smell inside of the academy. Okay. All right, so let's talk about camp check-ins. What are we doing on camp check-ins? So the check-in process for each day is very, very important. So let's talk about sports camps first. Regardless if it's a sports camp or a week-long camp, you should have your camp roster for each week that you have camp. We want to make sure that we're allotting enough time for them to get checked in. You want to make sure that you have all of the requirements that kid needs. Any paperwork, anything of that nature is filled out before they get there. That is going to reduce the frustration from the camp, from the staff staff point of view and getting the kid processed into where they can start having fun and get into the activity. Make sure that you do the check-in time. If your camp starts at 9 o'clock, I'd say do check-in from 8:30 to 8:45. That'll give you a 15-minute window that for the kids that are late, for the perpetually late parent to get in, you're starting on time. And it's not, the kid's not coming into camp and all the other kids, they're being so self-conscious about being late to camp. I want the same thing for our kids when they get there, because I don't want them, feeling like they're sticking out like a sore thumb. Make sure that they're checked off and make sure the parent signs them in. Now, I know it's on some of the sports camps, that may seem like it's a laborious thing, but we want to make sure that we've got all of that documented. And here's why. So one of the things that my wife is going to go over with you tomorrow is about payments, any possible chargebacks, things of that nature. The reason why sign-in sheets are so important is that if a parent ever pays for your camp, then tells the credit card, my child never did that camp, you have payment record as well as, nope, this is their signature, they were here each day. So when you're fighting the chargeback from the credit card company, you have proof that that person showed up. Because if you don't have proof, the credit card company is going to take that money away from you, even though you provided the service. So we want to do anything and everything we can to document what we're doing and how it's going. So that's why camp check-ins are so important. Now, the same thing goes for camp pickup. We want to make sure that they're signing their child out, especially if there's anything that we want to talk to them about. Remember what we talked about when I first started this morning. Our process with camps are funnel systems to other programs. We want to train the staff to talk to them about, talking about a highlight of the day for the child, making it a positive experience. But also talk to them about if you have other camps you're doing, a skills-based camp that they're ready, maybe they're ready for, start having that conversation. The men, they're doing really, really well. I think they're going to be ready for my level 2 camp, my level 3 camp. So you're already pre-framing them about what you want them to do. My staff has pre-framed them for after school, for martial arts lessons in my academy. We're getting that pre-frame ahead of time. On top of the fact that you have emails and text messages that are hitting them at the same time going out that week, especially near the end of the week, getting them to sign up for another camp, having a communication about maybe your year-round program for your skills development or your after school or your martial arts or whatever skills base you're doing. That's why those are so important. You want to have that face-to-face with the parents. Don't get me wrong. There will be some parents that are just going to fight no matter what. They don't want to come pick up their child. They want their child to walk out to the car. It's more of a burden for them. And that's not the kind of parent you want in the system in your programs, even though the kid would benefit the most. But if we can't get the parents to walk through a couple of small things when you're getting them to go into your bigger programs, it'll be one of those things that it'll be a fight and a nightmare the entire time. Okay, so we are going to take about a 10-minute break because I'm going to load up our parent handbook, and we're going to talk about camp check-ins. Camp orientation and how we do it, and why the parent handbook and the orientation is such a key integral part to your sanity and how smooth your camp runs. So it's almost 1:50. We're going to start the last session back up at 2 o'clock, and then we're going to get rocking and rolling. So let me stop this share. Let me pause. Let's get back on the last session we're going to run for today. So I want to share the screen because I want to give you two things that I want to make sure you're doing, and they're both going to feed into each other. All right. So let's look at this. Is an enrollment form. You have it in your blueprint, but I want to make sure that you understand why the pieces are here. So I would say probably 98, 99% of your families are going to have 1 or 2 kids. Now, I have coaching clients that are like, well, what if they got a 3rd kid? Get a 2nd page. It's that simple. But majority of me here, parent and guardian information. Now, I know that there's those cases where you've got divorced families and things of that nature. I stay out of that crap. And I tell the parents, and I pulled both parents in that can't stand each other, and I'll pull them in and I'll ream both of them. If they're doing stupid stuff like, tell your mother I said this, or tell your dad I said this. And we've seen it all. So we want parent and guardian information. And when I made this form many, many years ago, mobile phones were there, but they weren't as important as they are now. The only thing I really care about now is their mobile number. I want the other 2 just in case, if they've got them. Most parents don't have home phone number. Most families don't have home numbers anymore. But I definitely want the mobile number, and my work is the backup number. Who's the emergency contact person? If I can't get a hold of these 2 parents, who am I going to in case of an emergency? Now, on this one, I highly recommend that, and I can tell you horror stories, but I highly recommend that this is one of those situations that you need to make sure whoever is picking up a child, that they are on the authorized parent pickup list. Because I have seen custody issues. I've seen, people, they can't get away and they'll send a girlfriend or a boyfriend that the child barely knows to pick up a child. And I mean, it causes a big brouhaha. I've even had parents that have come in without ID. I had a military guy who was deployed. I had never met him. He came in to pick up his kids and didn't have his ID. The kids knew who he was, and they were so excited to see him. And I said, sir, I can tell that these are probably your kids, but, you don't have any ID on you. And you being military, that carrying your military ID is not an option for you. And I'm going to have to ask you to go home and pick up your ID to come back with. Initially, he was a little perturbed, but I think that once he understood that I was doing it so nobody was walking out with his kids that I had never met before, he was more understanding. So if they have to do a situation where something has come up, they have to send another parent or another adult to get the child, then they have to send me a copy of their driver's license, their name, all that stuff ahead of time so that I can verify ID when it's coming in the door. I would prefer their underage children are not picking them up. Yes, I know it's convenient to have, a 17-year-old child in the family that drives, but it's about responsibility. And I would prefer not to put that responsibility on a 16-year-old, God forbid if something happened. So I just prefer to have it 18 or above. We do put things on here about physician's name and things of that nature. Again, it's one of those things it's a luxury more of if anything ever happened, if I had to take them to an emergency room, I could tell them that this is their primary physician. So that if they needed to contact them to get medical records or things of that nature and consult with them, they'd have that ability to make that. Now, on the weekly reservation sheets, this is where they're doing each of their week reservations. Now, if you're running multiple camps, even multiple sport camps, don't wait for them to only sign up for the first one to get them to sign up for multiple camps. As my families are learning, like they do every year, is that you have to get me when they're going to be here. Because there comes a point in time when I have to look after the whole of the company and my employees and their livelihoods, not just block a spot and not have some, oh, well, we decided not to do anything. And then I have 2 open spots or an open spot. So we give them a lot of time, but if they're not going to do it, then we have to start filling it up. But this is where they're going to, we do our camps based upon the grade they're doing the next year. If you're running multiple camps, you can set it up whatever way you want. And each sports level camp is going to have their own way they do things based upon their age group, their level group. If they're a level 1, level 2, level 3, whatever it is, they're going to have those different groups based upon what they've accomplished or what they already know about their athletic skill and where they're at in that sport. Especially like soccer camps. Soccer camps like volleyball, baseball, football. Well, football doesn't really have as big a club system. On the 7v7 is really starting to make a push. But on that set, it's more about, 13U, 12U, 11U, 16U. It's all about how they set it up that way through the AAU. If you're signing up for 2 weeks of camp or less, both weeks of registration will be paid in full prior to attending the first week of camp. Now, that's something we did in our older days. I don't hold it as hard now, but it's something that we definitely get there. I make them initial all these. They've already initialed them on the original registration. Now I'm making them do it again, because now this is where we're pulling the payment information from. I understand the registration fees and weekly deposits are non-refundable. 2-week notice is required to cancel any weeks. They do not provide a lunch. I will charge $20 and a lunch will be provided. Used to be in the old days, we did a $5 lunch. Parents were like, why pack lunch? It's cheaper for me to do it that way than it is for and all the hassle and everything else. I'm going to go to the store. So we bumped it to $20 because parents walk in and be like, yeah, I didn't pack them lunch. Go ahead and pack them lunch. They just charge $5 to my account. So we cut that out. It's $20. So all these things have got to be done. Credit card information. We want billing information on file. One of the things that my wife is creating right now is a credit card authorization form that we're going to share with you guys that will have the ability to do that electronically, and it'll be protected so that you can, whether it's through PDF, Adobe, or Hello Smile through another company, that way you have that information on file, but not everybody can see it. This is something that I need you to do. One, and I'll get into it when we get into the parent handbook. So one of the things that I need them to do is I need them to initial every single one of these blocks that they have read the parent handbook and signed it and dated it. Because this way, if there's ever any discrepancy about, oh, I didn't know that, I didn't know they were supposed to do that, it's right in the parent handbook. They've signed it, they've initialed it, they've handed it back to us, we have a copy. So we can go back at that situation. Or if they say to the credit card company, well, they didn't tell me that was part of the requirement. We do. Now, what happens, most people do just like they do when they're buying something online, is they go over the product, and when it gets to the terms and conditions, they just scroll all the way to the bottom, hit the checkbox, and boom, they're gone. They never read it. But this way, you can always go back and they say, well, I didn't read the manual. That's on you. We gave you the manual to read. You didn't read it. That's on you. That's not on us. Transportation and medical releases. I hereby grant Peak Performance Training Center permission to transport my child. And I just realized it says grant, not grant. I have to change that. Medical release. Remember we were talking about medicine and dosage? That's where that goes. Emergency contact information, mom, dad, and 2 alternates. This particular sheet right here goes everywhere with us. We have a book, and it goes in. Each of these are printed up on every single one of our students, and they go everywhere that we go. So if we need to call them, I'm not having to worry about getting connected to a cloud someplace. Internet access sucks, doesn't make any difference. I have a hard copy. And so that is this part right here, and they sign it and they date it. So now let's get into parent handbook. So this book, now even if you're doing skills camps, I would still put together some kind of parent and player expectation manual so that they fully understand what the expectations are for being in the camp. These are things that we cover with them in the parent orientation. One, I want to make sure that all that registration paperwork is filled out, whether they do it electronically or they do it in handwritten form. I prefer electronically. I would much rather print out 4 or 5 pages of stuff so that I don't have to read handwriting, because sometimes parents try to fill it out so fast you can never read it. So then the second part is the handbook. And they tell them they need to read it, review it, sign off on it, and give us the sheet back that they've signed off on it. All right, so general information. It's just basically saying, what we do, who we are. If there's any questions, this is the actual handbook that we use. You have a copy of this on your blueprint. So all you have to do is emulate it. I'm going to put up the Word. This is a Word document form. I'm going to put it up on the Facebook page so you can take this and use what you want to use out of it, and then or don't. It's up to you. I mean, it's not one way or the other, but it'll definitely give you a guideline on what you have. I have my hours of operation on there. I have a non-discrimination policy. And I'm very adamant with my parents about, I don't care what the color of your skin is, your sexual orientation, your religious beliefs. I just don't care. I'm here to do one thing and one thing only, and that's develop your child to be an unstoppable force. That's what we're here for. Tax statements. Now, Paula will cover this more tomorrow, but if there's a way you can get the tax statements to where when the payment's made, a receipt is sent to them and they have a copy of your EIN number, that'll prevent you from having to go and print a lot of tax statements at the end of the year. Because I put it in here that it is your responsibility to keep all financial records. Our tax number is blah, blah, blah. Within your records and your tax ID, with your records and your tax ID number, you'll be able to file your deductions properly. We don't print end of the year tax sheets. That's on them. They have the receipt. They have the EIN number. That's all they need to give their CPA or to fill out their taxes. Because if I have to fill out 400 and some odd tax forms, my wife would kill me. And it's just a lot of work. They can fill it out and generate it off the receipts. So just make sure that whatever payment system you have will generate an end of the year receipt, or every time a payment's processed, it sends them a receipt that they can have that on. And also see if you can put the tax ID number on the receipt. If you can do that, that's going to make it even better, because now they have the tax ID number and the receipt of what they paid. Another funny thing that happens all the time is they'll call us up. Can I get your EIN number? Because I don't know where to find it. Do you have that parent handbook? Yeah, somewhere. Well, it's in there, but it's also on your receipts as well. Forms and paperwork. You want to make sure that all of the contact information, forms, and paperwork are up to date. With my existing parents, we have that data. So I'll ask them, has anything changed? No. Then we just pull the same paperwork, pull it over, and use it from after school to summer camp, back and forth. Registration fee and weekly deposits. The registration fees must be paid. Weekly deposits must be paid for you to lock in your spot. Before camp starts, we need the paperwork. And it outlines what they'll receive. And it even tells them, registration fees secure weekly reservations during the summer. We cannot hold your position without complete paperwork, registration fee, and weekly deposit. The weekly deposit will be applied to your weekly tuition. Campers will receive one summer camp t-shirt, a martial arts uniform, and a window decal. So again, we're telling them what they're going to receive for that money. It's not a situation where we're just taking money and nothing's happening with it. We're doing stuff. This is another statement, especially for me being here in Texas. We're an exempt organization. This is something that they ask us to put in. Plus, I want them to understand we are not a daycare center. We're a professional training academy that provides professional development to children and families. We are an authorized exempt organization of the Department of Health and Human Services Division in the state of Texas. And I want them knowing that. Because I even had one of my competitors, when somebody asked a question, I responded about what we do in our summer camp. And they said, well, you're not registered with the state as a licensed daycare center. You're right, I'm not. Don't want to be. Plus, my standards for what we offer and what we do are better than what the state requires. So it's one of those things that you're going to have people that are going to hate on it, or And for us, and we're going to get you where you need to be at too. You're going to be the 800,000-pound gorilla in the area. Everybody's going to want to emulate their camps after you because one, you're going to have a camp that's amazing, providing great things for kids. The parents are going to rave on you all the time, and you're going to make a lot of money, which is not a bad thing. We're going to provide that ability for you to start building a lifestyle for your family that's absolutely incredible. Registration fees are non-refundable. So when a parent calls in, I want to cancel my program. Okay, it's great, but we already bought a summer camp t-shirt for you. You can come pick it up, but I'm not refunding it because we've already outlaid that money. We've already gone and bought equipment and things based upon the registrations we have coming in. Tuition and fees. Talks about all the tuition and fee stuff in here, that it must be paid. We even talk about if you want to cancel, there's a summer camp change form must be completed and turned in to the senior staff for proper notification. We don't just let them have it to any part-time staff member. It's super important. Multi-parent families that are sharing costs of summer camp. If you're splitting the cost of summer camp with your ex-spouse, you have to sign a separate agreement. I prefer that one of them takes the lead because we've had it happen in the past where we split the money up and one parent's paying, the other parent's not. But we also let the other parent know if you reserve a week, whether your ex brings them or not, payment will still be drafted. None of that changes. There's a $30 charge for all return payments in addition to a $25 late fee. Most times we don't ever charge that. We know some parents are trying their best. But if I've got a parent that's being a horse's patoot, it turns into a situation. We've only had a couple of those, but it's really not good. Clothing and personal belongings. On clothing and personal belongings, please have them put their name on their stuff. If they have uniforms, put it on the pants, the top, and the belt. That way, they've got it's theirs. Kids are horrendous about changing, dropping stuff, and moving on. So tell the parents to please put their name in their stuff. This next one is probably the most important one that we have. Students should keep personal items at home, except during sleepovers or special events. Should a student bring a personal item, peak performance, summer camp, training center are not responsible for these items. Electronics are not allowed on a daily basis due to risk of damage or loss. On Friday, we allow electronics and personal items, including but not limited to Game Boys, PSP, tablets, iPods, MP3s, and cell phones are allowed. But they're allowed for taking pictures only, not for getting on there. If we catch them on it, we'll take it. No phone calls, texting, or internet activity will be allowed during the camp hours. If the camper needs to get in touch, with you, we will have them call from the academy phone or management phones. On these particular days, we will not be responsible for items that your children bring. In addition, all items should be personally marked with your child's name. If they lose it, not our responsibility. No different than my son went out. He went to a training session at his strength training place, left his AirPods there. He paid for them himself, but he lost them. And I'm not holding them responsible. That's his responsibility. So now he's got to go out and earn another $175 to buy new ones. We ask that they bring a pair of flip-flops or sandals and leave them in the academy every day, especially for swim days. But one of the things that I do, and we're different than an outdoor sports academy that we have people indoors, but we have, when kids are going into the bathrooms, I don't want them walking into the bathrooms barefooted and then walking back out on the mats because it's going to track anything out of there. Now, we keep our bathrooms really clean, but again, I want to make sure that we've got that. So I ask the kids, go to your locker, get your flip-flops and do that, or keep them on the edge of the mat. And we also have about 10 pairs of sliders at different sizes that if a child doesn't have them, then you wear our sliders to go to the bathroom, and then we disinfect them every day. So mobile phone and electronic use. And I'm very adamant about this part. It's not something because I've got first graders and second graders that have like iPhone 12s, and I don't understand why they have iPhone 12s. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. Your child needs to be here no later than 9 o'clock Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 8:45 Tuesdays, and arrival time for Friday will be dependent upon the requirements of the field and the week's field trips. Please check with the staff regarding arrival times each Friday. So we always send out a list, and then we post the arrival and departure schedules around the academy. We even tell the parents when they come in and take a picture of that so you know what time they need to be here each day. So we're on time. Illnesses. Now, if there's anything positive come out of COVID, this is probably the one thing, is that parents always, not always, it's kind of that's a all-inclusive word, but a lot of parents, if a child was running a low grade temp, would pop Tylenol in them, send them to school, and the temperature would go down, and then they'd come back up in a couple of hours. So if they have a fever, they have to be fever free for 24 hours before they can bring them to us. If they miss any days of camp, we're not refunding money. We're not, taking days out of that week and putting it on another week. We're not doing any of that. It's life. It's just what happens. We talk about transportation, medication, and about we even have a transportation sheet. It wasn't on that one, but we even have an expectations of transportation sheet, and that the parents have to sign it, because they need to understand that their child's not going to act the right way when we're traveling in a vehicle. And when we have field trips, which is every day, they can't come. They'll have to show up. They'll have to bring their child after the field trip's over at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. We talk about emergency drills. These are the weeks and the field trips for the weeks. And we go over that with them and what we're doing each Friday's field trip. We also talk to them about, we're going to get into food here in a second. Arrival times on Fridays will be dependent on the time of the scheduled arrival time at the above locations. Please make sure that on all field trip days, you arrive on time. We'll be leaving promptly. If you are late, you will need to arrange to get your child to us. Camp t-shirts must be worn every Tuesday and Friday for Camp Adventure, and worn every Monday, Tuesday, and Fridays for Camp Insanity. Food, sack lunches. So they pack lunch Monday through Thursday unless they have a special dietary requirement for Friday field trips. And then there are things that I don't want in their lunches. So I don't want mayo, milk, candy, chocolate, soda, yogurt, or yogurt-based products. Because as active as we are, I don't want their stomach, getting upset or throwing up. They'll be taken away from kids. Children fare better with, eating sandwiches, small chips, pretzels, fruits, crackers, and plenty of water. Now, we do have some kids that have food allergies. I don't make all the rest of the campers go without because they can't have. I will segregate them off with a counselor to make sure that they're not going to have any cross-contamination with any other food. We do the water bottles, the half-gallon water bottles, and that's what I really wanted them to bring. And I asked them to fill it before they ever come to camp. And you're going to have those parents, well, can you just fill it today? And then it turns into an everyday thing. No, you fill it. Be a parent, get up 5 minutes early, do your stuff. I don't want Gatorade. I don't want Powerade. They have more sugar than a soda has into them. And sodas and those kind of high sugary drinks, they act as diuretics, which means your body's going to be dehydrated faster. And as active as we are, it's super important. If we have to pack their lunch, it's going to be $20. And then we tell them if that's a special dietary requirement, we don't have vegetarian, vegan type options. That's something you're going to have to handle. The majority of my vegetarian and vegan families, they have to do it all the time anyways. It's just part of their prep. Now, we make every effort to keep a child safe. But, we're not, summer camp t-shirts must be worn. You can buy additional t-shirts for $25. And we don't use cheap shirts. I don't use $7 or $5 summer camp shirts. we use the dry fit antimicrobial summer camp shirts that we use. It wicks away moisture, keeps them cooler, but they're a better shirt. It's going to cost you a little bit more, but it's going to have a better result for you. Now, when it comes to, we want them to buy sunscreen. Now, I do have a few kids that have skin allergies, and so they have specialized sunscreen, so we even have a protocol for that as well. But I would just prefer, if they're going to buy sunscreen, I don't want spray bottles of sunscreen. One, doing spray bottles aside of the building when we're doing all that stuff makes a big, huge mess. Gets all over the mat, which we don't want. Secondly, I would just prefer they go to Walgreens or Walmart and get the NOAD 45. If they're bringing you an SPF 70, it doesn't work, meaning that it doesn't give you any greater protection than SPF 45. The body, there's just so much things that can protect, and that's just get the SPF 45. We may apply summer sunscreen multiple times because of having a child that is very fair-skinned. I talked about it earlier today. I'm fair-skinned. I have to watch that for myself. And the spray sunscreens, we just hand them back to them and say, please. But they have to pack it, and then it goes into the community bin. Unless they've got a prescription sunscreen that we put into another special bin, it just goes into our community bin, and those sunscreen bottles are broken up and put into different places. But we don't just let them bring their own and keep it in their locker. It goes in the community bin, so we're constantly have it. Swimming requirements. We talked a little bit about this earlier, about how we handle swimming safety and swimming requirements. And I tell parents all the time, your child may get to do things with you and you're one-on-one with them that I won't let them do. They may get to go off the diving board because you're in the deep end with them. They may get to hang out with floaties in the deep end. Not happening on my watch. And it's nothing personal. As a father, not even as a business owner, as a father, it would crush me to know that I lost a child on my watch. It would absolutely wreck me that I know that happened. And I had to face another parent and say, well, you know, I listened to you and I went ahead and I put them in the deep end with arm floaties on, and they burst and then they sank to the bottom and we couldn't get them out in time. I'm not doing it. And I tell the parents, if you don't like that, or the kid doesn't like it, then don't bring them on the 2 swim days, or just bring them out later on when we get back at about 1:30. Because I have to keep these children safe. And plus, I don't want them having a negative experience. Even if they didn't drown, I don't want them having a negative water experience. The water is such a great therapeutic tool in a lot of ways. The last thing we want to do is make them afraid of water and all the things that go along with it. So this is one of the things that I do, is that this is a requirement. The activity schedule we post in the academy, please check with the board and inform the staff you need to pick your child up early. You may need to meet us where we're at. We are typically back by 1:20, 1:30 every day, except for on Fridays. Whatever way you set it up, right? If they have to pick their child up and you're not at the academy, this is not, we're going to run the child back to the academy for one child. They have to meet us where we're at to come get the child. Now, because we're in the martial arts, there's a lot of etiquette and life skills training. Now, if you're doing sports camps, I highly recommend that you incorporate this into your curriculum. And the reason being is, if you look at our kids today, they're watching all the YouTube stuff, they're watching TikTok videos, and they think it's acceptable to walk around talking trash, you know, cussing, doing all those things, not being respectful. And the thing is that we're trying to, all of us, get them ready for adulthood, get them ready to be productive members of society. You know, as adults, with our friends, we're cutting up and, you know, we're shooting the crap and all that stuff, and we're by ourselves, cool. But when we're around these kids, we need to be setting an example for what we want them to act like when they're adults. And if we're cussing and using profanity and we're not being respectful, all the kids in my academy, they ask me a question, it's yes, sir, or no, sir. My response back to them, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Not because I have to, because I'm trying to lead by example, and that's what I require out of them. I ask them a question, I want yes sir, no sir back. Yes ma'am, no ma'am back. If you run a sports camp, that should be the same thing for you too. It will make a difference if a coach thinks that they're respectful and coachable, whether it's martial arts, whether it is dance, cheer, basketball, soccer, football, it doesn't make any difference. The more coachable, the more respectful the kid is. I'm not talking about being a pushover, just being respectful, right? Tim Kennedy's a friend of mine, and he said one time that he never worries about the guy getting in the cage with him that is loud and boisterous and talks a lot of crap. He said the guy that he super respects and looks out for is the guy that's respectful, because he knows that where his work ethic's at. He knows where those things are at. And so he knows that he's got the same core values that Tim has, right? And so he's willing to work to get to where he needs to be at. So we do a lot of etiquette and life skills training, and I highly recommend that you do that. If you are doing a skills-based program inside of your camp, talk to them about, what we're doing or what you're doing, what the expectations are. If you're doing progression level checks every quarter, like we do in the martial arts, we do testing every quarter or every weeks. So I highly recommend they do that, and make sure they're in the know so they can come see what their child's learning. If they're just coming and dropping them off at camp in the morning and they never see them and they pick them up in the afternoon, they never stay to watch class, or class is already over by the time they get there, they have no growth. They have no concept of the growth their child is experiencing. So if you can get them in to watch class or get them to watch the test, they can see, holy moly, man, wow, they learn more than I ever thought they would. Child smiling, having a good time. Again, everything we're doing is to push them to the next program. Use it as a funnel to get them to be into their programs. The child's going to benefit massively by being on our programs. So this is one thing we want to do when it gets into that setup. Now, I have this in our statement in our handbook multiple times. I also put the tuition breakdown, and we have tuition breakdowns for what our registration fees are, part-time campers, what the tuition is for just summer campers, what tuition is for campers that are in our orientation, our black belt club, and our peak performers program, because those programs have other tuition that's being already charged, and I don't want to double bill them. Same thing for Insanity, and same thing for Teen Extreme. Arrival and departure, we talk about that. We send the schedules out, and we'll talk about communication tomorrow. Behavior expectations, and the thing is that whether they're teenagers or they're not, if they're not acting the right way, they can't come back. And if they lose their tuition, they lose their tuition. We talk about pickup times. We also talk about if your child is removed from camp for safety or behavior violations and they're not invited back, there'll be no refund for any tuition or registration paid for current or future camps. They need to understand there's a level of expectation for behavior. I also put a notes section in, so when we're doing the parent orientation, they all have their handbooks and they're going over. And mobile and handheld device situation. Now, again, this is the transportation and medical release, and the copy of the emergency transport that goes on. But these are the things that we do and require from them to make sure when we're doing the parent orientation. The other thing on the parent orientation, it allows a child to meet the instructors. They know where they're going to be coming. They know where they're going to be at and where they're going to be, not be coming, but be and coming to. So for a lot of these children today, especially post-COVID, they're having massive anxiety about any new situations, about any kind of interaction, social interaction, and we want to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to rebuild that for them. So if they get to see us, they get to meet us, they know what vehicles we're riding on, especially like in our after-school program. I never let a parent enroll after school without the child coming to us first. Because think about the stress a child's got. They're at school, somebody new's picking them up. They've never seen them. They're going on a vehicle they've never seen before with people they don't know. And what the stress level that is in the child. I want them meeting who their driver is going to be, looking at the vehicles they're going to be picking them up so they can see the decals on the side. I want them meeting the staff and the instructors so they see familiar faces. It's going to greatly reduce their anxiety level. It would for anybody, right? So the more we do that, the better. And that's what these orientation meetings are. They're to set parent expectations, child expectations, make sure paperwork's turned in, set the tone. It sets the tone and what's expected. And I don't pull any punches. And I tell parents, we love you, but these things are going to run the way we want them to run because we have a lot of kids in the building. And if you don't think we do, come up and spend a day. Parents think it's really, really easy managing kids and there's one or two. When you're managing the numbers that we manage and the numbers you're going to be managing in the future, the more organized you are, the more your systems and routines are built, your staff training, all that stuff is in line, the better your camps are going to run, regardless if they're a day camp, a sports camp, overnight camp. None of that makes any difference. There's a reason why certain restaurants and certain businesses are the number one in their field is because of their proven systems and processes. And that's what you need to build. The great thing is you have a template. You've got things that you get to use and a blueprint that you can build off of. Even if you're a sports camp, you don't have to fill out the whole day's thing. Just fill out, I know that my camp's from 9 to noon. Then I've got to start the fact that I've got to have people, what time do I need to get the field set up? What time do the coaches need to be here to help me get the water stations set up and get those set up so that at 8:30 we're checking people in. So I can get the kids where they need to be at so that we are starting on time. Because you know how it is when a child comes in 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes late, and now you have to allocate one person to help them get up to speed to where everybody's already at. It's very frustrating. So the more you can plan this stuff in advance, the greater camps you're going to have, the more organized you're going to be, the better experience is going to be not only for the kid, but for the parent and for your staff. And how you get your staff coming back year after year is having proven systems and processes. If you have a badly managed camp, it's always in disarray and it always feels like you're flying by the seat of your pants. It's not fun. So get that stuff organized out. All right. Jeff, do you have any questions about anything or you're good for right now?
No, I think I'm good for right now. A lot of this we've kind of covered in some of our weekly calls, but it's great to go back through, especially as I'm finalizing writing everything up for the summer. So I'm still getting great stuff from this because it's hitting points that you can go through again and again. You're going to highlight different things each time, you'll catch something different. So good stuff.
Yeah. So tomorrow we're going to be covering. Let me get down here. So we'll start. I'll open the room at about 8:50. And then we're going to get into conversions and upgrades. Because remember, we talked about summer camps. All of your programs should be looked at as funnels. Even your martial arts or your basketball or soccer programs, they need to be looked at as funnels. Because if I've got a kid in my martial arts program, but I can get him into after school, my lifetime value on that student significantly increases. Then if they go to summer camp, right, then I'm looking at a situation where, especially if they go 12 weeks of summer camp, that's about $3,000, $5,000 for after school. Then they're doing their martial arts. That's about $10,000 a year or more value on that child, right? So the more I can get them in that, and remember we talked about that beat the formula. When I'm looking at my exit strategy, whatever time frame that looks like, my business is valued at a 7X, not a 2.5X on that number, which means more money back to us. So we're going to kick off with upgrades and conversions tomorrow. We're going to talk more about transportation, mainly where to go to buy vehicles and what to look out for. We're going to talk about communication and how important that is, getting your communication lined up for you, staff, and your campers and their parents. At 11 o'clock, my wife is going to cover billing and payments. She's going to go over the things and systems she's put into place. Because I'll be frank with you, I don't do the billing, my wife does. She manages that. She also puts in redundant systems in place, because we have had in the past where a software program has crashed and we've lost everything. And so she puts redundant systems in place to make sure no matter what happens, that redundant system's kept off site in a different location, but it's updated. So if anything goes wrong, power outage hits, no matter what's going on, we have that data. Staff scheduling, proper coverage and training, we're going to go over that a little bit. And then the parent handbook we covered today, but we want to make sure we can answer any questions about that. Field trip reservations, getting your field trips. And if you're doing field trips, if you're not doing field trips, that's okay. Then we're going to also talk about what can we set up on site that can give that field trip feel. And then, of course, closing Q&A. All right, guys, I hope you learned something today. We're going to keep trucking right along for tomorrow, but I'm going to close it out here and have a great, wonderful day. Let me stop this recording.